Unearthly inspirations compelling ordinary people to perform extraordinary acts. They thought it best to use members of the human population to communicate their message. Heavenly visitations inspiring everything from war to peace. They could have imparted that information to Joan of Arc to give her the confidence that ultimately led her military campaign to victory. And close encounters that leave behind mysterious clues to our past and our future. I thought it's not going to come to anything, and then something that appeared to be a real message regarding aliens emerged. Millions of people around the world believe we have been visited in the past by extraterrestrial beings. What if it were true? Did ancient aliens really shape our history? And if so, have they been helped by individuals among us, chosen to communicate important messages? Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk County, England, 80 miles northeast of London. During the Cold War, more than 12,000 American officers and enlisted men were stationed at 2 Air Force bases on the forest's northern and southern edges, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Shortly after midnight on December 26, 1980, military radar detected an unidentified flying object, and there were civilian reports of strange flickering lights in the sky. Within minutes, military policemen, including Staff Sergeant James Peniston and Airman First Class John Burroughs, were sent into the woods to investigate. What they encountered was something the experienced servicemen had never seen before. Through the dissipating light, I started seeing the silhouette of a triangular craft, Peniston recalled. It was completely black in color, except for these occasional bits of blue and orange light, and yellow light running through it. There were blue lights. There was like an orange sphere above it. There was a white light that would come out underneath it, and then there was a misty orange haze. In his report, Sergeant Peniston described the strange craft's dimensions as roughly 6.5 feet tall, with 9-foot sides. He also noted unusual markings, raised symbols similar to Egyptian hieroglyphs. I was expecting to find, I don't know, USAF or something like that, he said. But what I found were glyphs, pictorial glyphs that made no sense at all. Then I was running my hand over the side of the craft. It was very warm to the touch. Upon touching the craft, the 26-year-old serviceman claimed he received a strange and powerful vision. Ones and zeros and ones. The ones just made no sense. I took my hands off it, and it just stopped. Then there's a bright flash of light, and at that point, whatever it was, appeared to go up in the air, take off, and go back towards the coast. And we didn't have any more contact. Peniston and Burroughs were ordered by the deputy base commander to treat the alleged sighting as if it had never happened. Still, after 3 decades, James Peniston remains haunted by his strange vision, so much so that he felt compelled to keep a written record of it, a record he kept locked away for nearly 30 years. It's like someone was holding a picture of these zeros and ones. I could see it in my mind's eye, he explained. So I recorded those one afternoon. What they mean, I don't know. Could the strange numbers from James Peniston's vision be some type of extraterrestrial code? If so, Peniston would not be the first to claim to have received messages from otherworldly visitors. In fact, history is filled with accounts of people compelled into action by contact with what they claim to be an extraterrestrial, divine, or supernatural being. Abraham, Muhammad, and St. Paul are described as having been inspired by visits from God. Moses, Confucius, and the legendary Cambodian figure Preah Pisnokar are said to have met strange visitors who passed along moral codes and philosophies. God chose them because of their integrity, because of their faith, one scholar noted. They were leaders that God had chosen to put in certain positions. People respected those leaders and knew that they were people of God. According to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, visions are not divine at all. They were, in fact, visits by extraterrestrials. Our ancestors thought it was a vision, but it never was. The person didn't quite comprehend that he or she was visited by flesh and blood extraterrestrials. Perhaps the best-known example of a man receiving specific instructions from an extraterrestrial source can be found in the story of Moses. According to the biblical book of Exodus, Moses first encountered God in the form of a burning bush. It was here that he was given his mission to deliver the Hebrew people out of slavery in Egypt and into the Promised Land. Later, at Mount Sinai, After he had safely brought the Jews into the desert, he was handed the 10 Commandments, laws given to man directly by God. Eventually, these moral codes became the foundation of a worldwide religion. But to ancient astronaut theorists, the story of Moses may be interpreted not only as divine, but also as an alien encounter. According to the Old Testament, Moses went up on Mount Sinai to meet with God. And it states, "And they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet as it were a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its radiating clarity." One researcher pondered, does something like this exist? Or was it some sort of misunderstood metallic ramp? But it gets even better. Moses actually describes Earth seen from outer space. The quote is, "Thereupon I saw the whole round of the earth at once, the depth of the earth, and the vast altitudes of the heavens." I mean, here he describes Earth as being round at a time when that should not have been known, according to mainstream scientists. Is it possible that Moses was inspired by a force not only from the heavens, but from another world? If so, is it possible that other divine inspirations have also had otherworldly origins? Puccini said that his great opera, Madame a Butterfly, was from God, that he wrote it down, but it came directly from a divine source. William Blake, whose entire opus, his writing and painting, was based on repeated angelic visitations. Brahms said that his music came from something beyond himself. He was the one who wrote it down, but he had to give credit to something beyond himself. Could great works of art, music, literature, and religion really have been gifts to humanity from other worlds? If so, then why weren't these gifts given directly from aliens to humanity, instead of being communicated through human intermediaries? Perhaps an answer, like many alien messages, can be found in one of the oldest and holiest places on Earth. If, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, extraterrestrial beings have been contacting us throughout the centuries, then what are they trying to tell us? It appears again and again that here on Earth we're dealing with something that could be called the hidden directorate, a directing force of intelligent beings who may even be our progenitors, and have been working with humanity ever since we began evolving on this planet, and will intervene at key points to try to nudge our development in a certain direction. Why were some of our ancestors told to construct a building or to build an ark? Personally, I think to ensure mankind's survival. There are stories of malevolent gods, of malevolent extraterrestrials, but by and large, the stories that we have from ancient times, the gods were actually very benevolent, and these extraterrestrials have helped us throughout the millennia to survive to this day. One of the oldest and most widespread stories of divine or unearthly intervention in human events can be found in the many great flood myths. There are flood myths all over the world, not just in the Bible, an expert explained. You can find them all throughout South America. You can find them in Native American traditions. You find them in the Celtic traditions, the legend of Ragnarok, the deluge. It's in Asia. Native Africans have flood myths. So the story of Noah is not an isolated event that only happens in the Bible. It's part of a bigger story. The oldest documented flood myth is the story of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The ancient Sumerian tale was discovered on a series of clay tablets dating back thousands of years. Utnapishtim has a story which is almost identical to the story of Noah. There's only a few slight differences. In the Utnapishtim story, the beings that spoke to him and warned him about this spoke through the walls of his house, and his house then became the craft that was used to evacuate. Like Noah, Utnapishtim collected every type of animal in anticipation of the flood. But could it have really been possible to collect every type of animal and fit them all in a single craft? Or might the ark have been a metaphor for another, much more advanced and extraterrestrial form of transportation device? The ark in the Sumerian story is shaped like a cube. We now have physicists developing hyperdimensional physics models in which they're actually plotting out the mathematics of how these higher dimensions are constructed. What they look like is called a tesseract, a cube within a cube. So it's possible that the cube referred to in the original Epic of Gilgamesh could be describing a Stargate portal that used this type of hyperdimensional geometry as a way to ensure that Utnapishtim and all the animals and people he saved wouldn't be here on Earth at all. And that's how they were able to survive the deluge. Around the world, many churches, temples, and other holy structures are said to have been divinely inspired by angels, gods, and even beings from other worlds. But why? To honor and praise a supreme being? Or might there be another purpose? Angkor Wat, Cambodia. In the 16th century, one of the first Westerners to see the elaborate temple, Portuguese monk Antonio de Madalena, described it as an extraordinary construction, unlike any other building in the world. With each side measuring nearly a mile long, Angkor Wat remains the planet's largest religious structure. Although mainstream archaeologists believe Angkor Wat was built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II as a state temple and capital city, Cambodian legends maintain it was built as far back as 600 BC by Preah Pisnokar, the offspring of a commoner father and a mother who came from the heavens. When grown, Preah was said to be abducted up into a flying palace by a group of otherworldly beings led by the god Indra. The message Preah received was to be a leader for his people and a teacher, a historian recounted. He was taught all these different things when he was up at Indra's heaven, this flying palace up in the sky. When he came back to Earth after this long education, Preah was basically the chosen one to teach his people the ways of the world and the universe. According to the myths, Preah was also commissioned to build Angkor Wat, not just as a sanctuary of peace and healing, but as a landing zone for the sky beings who taught him, referred to as the glowing ones. The way they describe it says that no real tools were actually used, but just magical water. He was able to pour this magical water onto stone, and after a while, it would harden into place. Magical water? Come on. There is no such thing as magical water. So my question is, what type of technology was used? Preah was able to build this magnificent city with ease. That's what the ancient texts are saying. Angkor Wat was more than likely built by the hands of human beings, but the architectural plan and sophistication to lay out that type of complex could not have been engineered by human beings alone at that time. 6,000 miles northwest of Angkor Wat, a 15th century French girl also reportedly received a divine inspiration, not to build, but to lead men in war. Orléans, France. In 1429, the city was besieged by the English during the 100 Years' War. The survival of the French military and government appeared doomed. Then, 17-year-old Joan of Arc traveled to Chinon, where she persuaded the local leaders that the saints, Michael, Catherine, and Margaret, had visited her and told her that her presence in Orléans would inspire the French army to break the siege. The Joan of Arc story is a fabulous tale of a vision really affecting history in a practical and concrete way, a scholar noted. France was in bad trouble. This sensitive soul, a very young girl, has the vision of saints that come to her and tell her to lead an army and free a city. She does so. She also has some prophecy from these visitations, and she's able to end a siege of a major city and make significant contributions to history, all because these saints came to her in a vision. While Joan served primarily as a military figurehead, she also designed new artillery tactics and repeatedly outsmarted the more experienced English commanders. But did her mysterious visions actually come from heaven? Or might the French teenager have received, as ancient astronaut theorists suggest, a type of advanced extraterrestrial knowledge? If this is in fact what was happening, then it would lead one to conclude that the hidden directorate decided that the way the world would turn out, if this battle had not been won, in favor of the French would have been an extremely negative outcome for humanity. So Joan of Arc was then contacted by a luminous extraterrestrial being that could have imparted that information to her, to give her the confidence that ultimately led her military campaign to victory. If extraterrestrial beings have inspired and affected human events, then is it really, as some suggest, to help improve humanity? Or could there be another, perhaps darker and more sinister agenda? Hizarlik, northwestern Turkey. More than 3,000 years ago, this was the walled city of Troy. According to Greek mythology, Troy was the site of a horrific war between the Trojans and the Achaeans that was manipulated by the gods. Thousands upon thousands of people died, and the city of Troy is totally destroyed, an expert explained. It's hard to imagine when you read stories like this, of gods asking people to go to war, to do things they wouldn't want to do. It's hard to imagine that they want what's best for us. In my opinion, extraterrestrials are just like humans. So, of course, extraterrestrials also would take sides. They would take sides with certain people and make enemies with other people. But when bad things happen to good people, does it suggest that alien visitors are capable of having evil intent? Or does it simply suggest the presence of bad aliens as well as good ones? You look back to these stories, some of which have to do with actual historical events that lead to blood, guts, destruction, and you say to yourselves, maybe they don't want what's best for us. Maybe their values and concerns have absolutely nothing to do with ours. Just like there are good people and bad people here on Earth, there's good and bad extraterrestrials out there. Not everything is hunky-dory out there. Good and evil permeate the entire universe. Yin and yang, there's a balance. I'm not sure it's always that cut and dry. In the book of Exodus, some translations say an angel killed all the firstborn Egyptians. Some say that the Lord, and I put that in quotations, slaughtered the firstborn Egyptian sons. It's hard to reconcile that, at least from my perspective, that a benevolent, loving God would have angels slaughter innocents, to slaughter kids. Half a world away from the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic, another massacre of innocents was said to have been directed by the gods. Tenochtitlan, Mexico. 500 years ago, this was the capital of the Aztec Empire. During the 15th century AD, the high priest Tlacaelel claimed to have received a command from the gods in the form of a dream. His people were to perform human sacrifices. The Aztecs are, like so many other civilizations on this planet, for them, dreams were the primary means of communication with the other world, a historian explained. So interpreting the dreams was a central thing which the high priests had to do. Now the question is, why did he do this? Is this just something Tlacaelel invented? Or is it really the fact that he had a dream whereby his new and brutal regime somehow had to be imposed upon his people? But if, as ancient astronaut theorists maintain, there are malevolent gods or evil extraterrestrials, does that suggest we have something to fear? Or might the evil be found not in the message, but with the messenger? The possibility that some messages that were sent by extraterrestrials have been received and misinterpreted is fairly large, because our ancestors thought that these messages were sent by godlike beings, by divine creatures, which they never were. Now there's quite a bit of evidence, even contemporary, of people committing murders, or about to commit murders, who believe that either God spoke to them or something else, and we actually find in many cases that this is not the case, that this is delusion. In the Bible's book of Genesis, God instructs Abraham to kill his only son Isaac. But was this command really given by God? Or might Abraham have received multiple messages from more than one being? Might it actually be a sort of conversation whereby Abraham and Isaac are not subjected to one deity, but to more than one deity giving them contradictory messages, whereby one being might be saying, "Kill your son," and the other being might be saying, "Don't kill your son"? Are we in fact confronted with two warring civilizations or two warring tribes? And I really do think that the gods, the extraterrestrials, knew 100% what they were doing, a theorist suggested. Just like when we arrive on a different planet and we achieve instant godlike status, we'll use that to our advantage. We're not going to say to them, "Oh no, we're like you." We'll say, "Yes, you obey us, or else." And that is exactly what happened here on Earth 10,000 years ago. For ancient astronaut theorists, one fact is certain. After contact is established, the fate of the human messenger is not always a pleasant one. After her capture by the English army, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake as a heretic. St. Paul, who converted to Christianity after a divine apparition, was later executed by the Romans, and Moses led his people through the desert for 40 years, but could not enter the Promised Land himself. Any time God chooses a particular person to do a particular job, you're always going to have opposition, a theologian noted. Moses had opposition with Pharaoh, and Paul, of course, was stoned. Those outside incidents, those forces that came against them, that was the burden, so to speak. Some people who might have received conceivable messages by extraterrestrials are at first fearful that they might have to upend their lives, or even worse, be called crazy. But could the fear of ridicule or death on the part of human messengers explain why there are not more alien messages that get transmitted? Or might many of those who have experienced extraterrestrial contacts have closed their eyes or shut their ears simply because the truth may be too incredible to bear? Billions of people around the world consider holy books like the Bible and the Quran to be the Word of God. Hundreds of millions of Hindus view the Mahabharata as a guide to spiritual enlightenment, handed down by the god Lord Krishna himself. Each of these holy books contains religious principles in the form of philosophies, parables, and moral codes. Messages from beyond ordinary knowledge seem to come in a variety of forms of visitation: a dream, sometimes an object, a tablet, a golden plate, a book, a scholar explained. So it helps. A book is an ordinary object we are familiar with, and yet if it's seen as divinely inspired, we can take it as more than an ordinary book. The great majority of mankind today regards the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran as the Word of God. But is it possible that these books were nothing else but guiding books of how we should conduct our lives, and that these moral codes were in fact given to us by extraterrestrials, whom our ancestors thought were gods? I don't think the Mahabharata is a work of fiction, it's an actual history, an expert asserted. And the history given in the Mahabharata includes not only actions of human beings on Earth, it also includes actions of extraterrestrials on other planets and on this Earth, and interaction with human beings here. Cultures all over the world believe deities and other non-human entities frequently communicated through intermediaries known as prophets. In the Quran, it's written that God has sent over 100,000 prophets throughout history. Many Native American cultures believed God spoke to them through shamans, much like the oracles of ancient Greece. An oracle is a person, but a person in some divine state, an altered state of some kind, who is able to hear the voices of the gods, but then translates it into accessible human language. But could the same phenomenon apply to Judeo-Christian religious texts? Might biblical stories of angels and miracles actually be misinterpretations of ancient alien contact or inspiration? The visitations or apparitions come to give some gift, to open the mind, to lead to a new perception, to lead to a new possibility, either a new artistic take on something or a new plan for humanity, a philosopher suggested. Often we're trapped in some kind of thinking that needs to break beyond its known limits, but we're caught. We are unable to see, to get a transcendent perspective. And that is what the visitation makes possible. If that is true, there might be additional evidence of alien contact by examining breakthroughs in the fields of astronomy, archaeology, and physics, or perhaps what is arguably the most universal of all languages, mathematics. Cambridge University, England, February 1913. Mathematics professor Godfrey H. Hardy receives a letter containing complex mathematical theorems and formulas from 26-year-old Srinivasa Ramanujan of India. The distinguished scholar is stunned by what he reads. Hardy looks at these theorems and says, "My God, we've never seen anything like this. This is mathematics of the highest order. It's so convoluted and complex that nobody could have come up with this by their imagination. There has to be something here." An acknowledged genius and mathematical prodigy since childhood, Ramanujan was devoutly religious and often claimed his breakthroughs were communicated to him in his dreams by the Hindu goddess Namagiri. In the decades since, his theorems have proved invaluable to those working in cutting-edge fields like string theory. All of the science that we need to eventually be able to create portals, stargate travel, hyperdimensional access mechanisms, levitation, teleportation, it all needs a mathematical foundation, a physicist explained. And the closest that we have right now are the Ramanujan equations that we've been able to decipher so far, which came to him directly from this goddess who appeared to him in dreams. Could Ramanujan have been telepathically receiving important information that might enable humans to build a portal or stargate to other dimensions or alien worlds? If so, why? What is the ultimate purpose of what some believe to be alien communications? October 2010. For nearly 30 years after their alleged encounter with an unidentified aircraft in England's Rendlesham Forest, retired military airmen James Penniston and John Burroughs rarely spoke to each other about the incident. Yet both men remain haunted by their experience. That was the life-changing event that happened out there, Peniston reflected. You know, the problem with life-changing events, they affect you for your life. I want to know what it was, Burroughs added. I think there are people out there in our government who have a better idea, and they could tell us what went on, what happened to us. But I don't know how to tell you for sure what it was and where it came from. Shortly after his reported encounter, James Peniston felt compelled to write down the long and complex numerical sequence of ones and zeros he claimed he saw when he touched the spacecraft. But were they really just random numbers? I was getting this not from memory, but this mental picture of these codes written out. This binary-type code, he explained. So I tried to suppress it, but I just had this urge to put this down. We now realize that the best way of communicating with an ancient civilization is the binary code, a researcher noted. If we know this, then obviously anybody else in the universe will notice as well. And when we know that our ancestors, either on their own or with some help from strangers, knew this as well, then we realize that really the binary code is the best, if not the only means of alien communication. For 3 decades, Peniston kept the mysterious numerical sequence hidden between the covers of his Air Force notebook. There they remained unexamined and undeciphered. I was scared to death, he admitted. I was sitting there going, okay, there's something wrong with you, Jim. You're not right. You're not thinking straight. This stuff is so bizarre you can't tell anybody this. They'll take your gun away from you. They'll kick you out. All those things were in jeopardy. That's what I was thinking about at that moment. That if I start telling anybody exactly what I was thinking, that would be the end of it. The refusal of the call is probably an experience all thoughtful people have, a psychologist observed. That is, there is some project, some task, some mission, but we waver, we doubt ourselves, and don't immediately respond to our destiny. This is not a good thing. After eventually leaving the Air Force and returning to the United States, Peniston found he was being haunted by persistent dreams, both about his experience in the forest and the meaning of the mysterious numerical message he received. What they mean, I don't know, he confessed. I've never had them analyzed or anything like that. I mean, we were out there doing our jobs with a situation that we never handled before. In October 2010, Peniston entrusted his 6 handwritten pages of ones and zeros to a computer programmer. He hoped the apparently random series of numbers could be translated into something resembling a readable message. Could someone write out 6 pages of binary? Well, probably not, the programmer remarked. They would need some help, or they would have to be some kind of savant or supercalculator. Sort of transcribing it into my computer to see what I might find, I thought, it's not going to come out to anything. And then something that appeared to be a real message regarding aliens emerged. To his astonishment, after plugging the numbers into a computer, a fragmentary sentence emerged. It stated, "Exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advance." Another portion of the message revealed what appeared to be navigational coordinates. Could this now decoded series of numbers actually be the evidence the human race has been searching for? Proof that we are not alone? Exploration of humanity. Is that for good or for evil? A theorist wondered. Planetary advancement. Is that advancing the human race, as many have theorized? Or is that the advancement of some armada coming to conquer Earth? As for the navigational coordinates, amazingly, they point to the geographic location of a mysterious sunken island known in Celtic legend as High Brazil. It was said to be the home of a civilization thousands of years ahead of its time. It is also occasionally referred to as the Other Atlantis. High Brazil was believed to be a mysterious land in which the people living there had a high degree of civilization, a historian explained. They used sound technology and vibrational healing technology. They were highly ethical, highly moral people, and they considered everyone over in Europe to be barbarians, and they did not want to mix with them at all. They enjoyed the isolation and the seclusion. But if the strange binary message in Peniston's notebook lists the coordinates of High Brazil, what does it mean? They may be ancient astronauts, and the Rendlesham Forest incident could have been them coming back. Finding a person who was ready to receive the message, who had the right tuning to receive the message, to let us know that the people we call the High Brazilians are still out there, and they want us to be ready to accept in the future some sort of open congress and communication between our world and theirs. There's certain incidents going out there where I know where you don't remember. I don't remember, but there's certain things together we don't remember, Burroughs said. Right, Peniston agreed. Well, even Head said that he remembers me pulling my weapon, and we all blacked out, and I don't remember that. In December 2010, James Peniston, along with John Burroughs, planned to return to Rendlesham Forest and to the exact same site where they claimed to have encountered a mysterious craft 30 years earlier. We're both compelled to go back, Peniston stated. Being in the area will cause us to have total recall of what happened in December of 1980. I can't explain it, just like I couldn't explain it the first time. But I think we're going to have a better understanding of what we need to do from there. Could there be more? Yeah, there could be more. If Peniston and Burroughs do return to the English forest where they claim to have had a close encounter, what will they find there? More clues? Even more messages. And what if the mysterious binary code found in Peniston's notebook, the phrase, exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advance, and the strange geographic coordinates that point to a lost island, really provide evidence that we are being visited and perhaps studied by visitors from another world? Could this event really be the latest in a long line of alien encounters that stretches back to antiquity, to the time of the gods? If so, are they helping us, or are they preparing us to help them?